Hello there, this is Fiona, host and main GM for What Am I Rolling, a twice-monthly RPG one-shot podcast. This is a bonus Q&A episode to tide us over to the next one-shot, and it is indeed a very special Q&A, as a few weeks back I had the absolute pleasure of interviewing the fine folks at Rowan, Rook and Decard, Grant Howitt, Chris Taylor and Mary Hamilton. As many listeners of this podcast will know, we've played a fair number of Rowan Rook and Decard one-shots over the years, including Honey Heist, Goblin Quest, Little Helpers, Pride and Extreme Prejudice, Adventure Skeletons, Crash Pandas, Goat Crashers, and most recently, Jason Statham's Big Vacation. To say I'm a big fan of their work is an understatement, and I'm looking forward to recording some more one-shots in their other work, Spire, and their brand new game, Heart, in the near future. If you're looking for something a little bit different for your RPG nights, then I can highly recommend having a look at their back catalogue of games. You can check out all their RPGs, including their new game Heart, and find links to the official Rowan Rook and Decard Discord server on their website. That's rrdgames.com. You can check out the latest one-page one-shots on Grant's Patreon at www.patreon.com/GSHowitt. Grant and Chris also run the Hearty Dice Friends podcast, a weekly show where they answer role-playing questions from the listeners, available to download and stream wherever you find podcasts. I'll put links to Rowan Rook and Decard's work and the team's recommendations on the What Am I Rolling website and in this episode's show notes. Alright, so we'll just start with the very first question is, can you tell me a little bit about yourselves? Who are you and what do you do?
Which one of us should go first?
Well, you're talking now.
Well, yeah, but that was to give people space.
Oh, I see. Why don't you continue talking?
That sounds good. Hello. We are Rowan Rook and Decard, or more accurately, Howitt, Hamilton, and Taylor.
And what do you do?
Oh yeah, we make role-playing games. It's very exciting. Yes, we have Chris and I write the role-playing games, and Mary is a sort of giant business brain who
publisher.
Helps. That's the word.
Yeah,
a publisher.
We knew there's a technical word for it.
Yeah.
I love the idea that you've got that on your CV, Mary, is just big business brain. It's like number one skill.
Interestingly, my consulting company is called Galaxy Brain.
Not a joke.
Nice. I like that.
Because it turned out that was free and I couldn't come up with a better name.
And we did talk about it for quite a while.
We did.
Trying to work out what the best name was. We do role-playing games, so we've done Spire, we've done Heart, we've done Honey Heist, Jason Statham's Big Vacation, One Last Job, Goblin Quest, Royal Blood. Honestly, slightly too many games because we put out one a month.
Yeah.
Yeah. There is unfortunately no way to prevent Grant from writing games. We have tried.
We do lose track of some of them.
There is a magic button on the internet, and when I push it, $2,500 falls out. So I'm not going to stop pushing that button every month.
In order to push it, you have to do quite a difficult thing.
I do. Yes, sorry. Yes, it's not just a magical button. I do have to feed it role-playing games.
Yes.
Well, we'll start with that then, if you don't mind. So, where do your inspirations for sort of Rowan Rook and Decard games come from? From my sort of quick look at your website, you sort of go into sort of two categories. You go for sort of the heavy RPG, which are very beautifully bound, like proper thick books, and then, as you said, the one-page role-playing game. So where, collectively, from sort of the creator side, do you folks sort of get your inspirations from?
Mary, where do you think we get it from?
The pair of you are obsessed with death.
Oh, there is that.
And you've spent most of your relationship, marriage? I don't know where you're at right now.
Let's go with marriage.
Could we combine the words bro and marriage in some way?
No,
most of your marriage.
No, that ends up with brarage.
Yeah.
That's not good. That sounds like a kind of cabbage.
Or marrow.
Relationship.
A substantial amount of your creative partnership has been about finding ways to explore the concept of death, rebirth, and the interesting ending in different ways. So when it comes to the big stuff, I think that's where you go.
That's so much about our pathology.
Absolutely.
Yep. In terms of the other stuff, in terms of the smaller stuff, generally you take an animal and a crime and you sort of smash them together until something funny comes out.
People like animals. People want to do crime.
Yeah.
You have to pick. If not a victimless crime, then you have to set up a bad victim, and then you create an animal which people just want to be, like bears or goats or what have you, and then you just sort of let the details fill in themselves.
Well, sometimes they sort of spiral out of really strange conversations we have. Like when I got obsessed by houses being alive at one point, and we made Genius Loci.
Yeah, that's a game where you play a 1960s post office, and you eat.
It's a challenging and confronting game. It's not.
It's surprisingly itch-o, given
It
our
is a
normal.
bit.
Yeah,
You really learn a lot about yourself.
I think there's something there that, like, your big games take 18 months to 2 years to come to fruition, and they go through dozens of iterations and these really complex and in-depth sort of things. And I don't think, certainly Grant, I don't think could maintain that without some sort of pressure valve for the batshit ideas that you can't put into those games. So
they do blow off a lot of steam.
Yeah,
like,
I get out a lot of the bad ideas.
And I remember when you started your one-page game Patreon, it was very much about going, what can I do that would be finished? How do I make games in a way that allows me to learn and to iterate quickly and to kind of show my working a bit?
Finishing things is so valuable. And so often as creators, like, you get caught up in doing this massive project, or like, I'm going to do this thing, but I've got to learn 8 things to work out how I do it, and blah, blah, blah. Whereas if you can get something done, there's an element of completion. You can move on. It lets you sort of close that loop. I will also say that as far as my personal inspirations go, the only 2 books I can ever remember reading are Perdido Street Station and Annihilation. And they've informed all of my work for the last 4 years.
Yeah.
Neuromancer.
Oh, sorry, yes, Neuromancer, the other thing which has informed my work for the last 4 years, yes.
Well, if it ain't broke, don't, if you're still pressing that button and people are still
it ain't broke, but it could be improved. I could try reading a 4th book.
Yeah, we're going to add a book to the repertoire.
You've got to be careful, though, because God knows what's going to happen. I tried reading House of Leaves, but it was too long.
Too big a book.
But also, like, the last book that you read became, like, you wrote an RPG about it for 2 years.
Yeah, that was Annihilation.
Yeah. There's a big inspiration for Heart in there.
It is the same thing, honestly.
Shut up.
You'll find out. Vanmir will come round. He'll start asking for royalties.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to give it all away. You got at least another 2 games out of that.
Yeah.
So they're going to sort of the more production side then, Mary. So obviously, like we sort of said this, like, obviously Chris and Grant are the creative brains of it. So you get obviously all this stuff. So what's the sort of the process? How do you get these sort of ideas and sort of transform it or help shape it, I guess, into a business? If possible, I don't know.
That's a great question, because I've not considered it from that angle before. Like, this sort of happened by accident and then deliberately. So we actually, the first Kickstarter that Grant and I ran was for Goblin Quest, which was a good idea in 2013, when if you had a good idea, it turns out you could just do a Kickstarter and people would throw money at it. It wasn't the business the way it is today. And then we all worked on Unbound together, and I learned a bunch about how to print books, and more importantly, how not to print books, and various other things during that process. But we hadn't really conceived the idea of actually, like, turning it into something that would be sustainable. It wasn't really until I guess towards the end of the point where these 2 were developing Spire, where it became kind of clear that actually the sensible thing to do would be to properly incorporate and treat this as a serious kind of going concern. And I think it's just been a process of solving one problem at a time. And sometimes the problems you solve result in other second problems, and sometimes they result in solutions that are actually really useful and scalable and that keep you going. But these days, what tends to happen is Grant and Chris come up with interesting ideas. They fire them at each other for about a year, I'd say, give or take.
Yeah, roughly.
10 months.
Yeah, okay. And at which point it becomes clear that is the next big game. And thus far, we've kind of been on a cycle of one new big system every couple of years. And then supplements and side elements kind of in the intervening time. But what I guess I'm sort of standing near them, kind of with my arms out going, oh, what's happening?
just catching product.
Yeah. Is it a big one? Is it a little one? Is it, what kind of shape is this one? Okay, that's fascinating. And then trying to going from there and turning it into putting it into a system that as far as possible we control. And it's a really interesting there's a really interesting spectrum of things that you can do as a small publisher, which is what we are, to make decisions about what you own and control and therefore have risk involved in, and what you decide not to have the risk but therefore don't have as much ownership or control over. We've been, more by luck than judgment, we've actually built a business where we own and control a lot of our distribution as well as our production. And that means that we're able to survive much more effectively on our products than I think a lot of other small creators are. So the fact that we do our own, we have our own partnerships with warehouses, all that jazz. That makes a surprising amount of difference to the bottom line.
It feels like such a massive learning curve. It sounds like, anyway, just like you said, just sort of getting it all together and then just learning as you go. Like it can be, I guess, obviously right now, it may be very scary to start off an independent RPG company. I mean, we'll probably come back to that later in the interview, but as I want to talk about Heart. So obviously that's
very good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mary.
I will say it's also very good.
I'm just purely from a business point of view, it really helps if the things that you're trying to make money out of are really good.
Good, and also that you're passionate about. Yeah. In case people out there who listen to this podcast don't know what Heart is, could you guys do a sort of a brief summary of it, and how does it differ from previous game, which is Spire?
Spire was urban revolution with fantasy and technology, and it was about subterfuge and trying to wrest control of a city that you once owned back from oppressors.
And religion too, I think.
There's a huge religious aspect through it.
Most characters are clerics.
In some fashion. Or warlocks.
Warlocks are Heart, yeah. Clerics are Spire, yeah.
And Heart is the exploration of this kind of roiling unreality underneath that area. So it's the same people from Spire, but in a very different setting. So where we had urban, now we've got this kind of visceral dungeon crawling. And I mean that very much in the term of viscera. Heart is organic, and it is essentially a sentient dungeon. Because what we wanted to do, we wanted to make essentially a kind of OSR game with that slight feel to it, but with a real story game slant to it. So rather than like having a pre-done map where you turn left down a corridor and you experience the room that's there, we made a game where the entire world can change based on emotion and intent. And that lets us put in a load of really strange things and really lean hard into sort of body horror and isolation and helplessness that people would experience in that sort of situation.
All the fun stuff really you want from a role-playing game.
Yeah.
One of the big things we tried to manage was working out why on earth you would go into a dungeon at any point. Because it's a terrible plan. And unless you're backed up by, like, I don't know, a university or some sort of guild, it seems like a really stupid idea to go down. So, like, in addition to having a class, which are all very strange because we wrote them, we've also got callings, which is the reason why you keep hanging around in this ridiculous underground meat cavern. And we tried to focus on these desperate, quite tragic stories of dungeon crawling and get away from the whole sort of counting torches and how many arrows you have and that sort of thing, because that involves planning. And Chris and I think, are...
Verse?
We're averse. We are planning... I'd go so first to say intolerant. We absolutely loathe the idea of planning games or doing any sort of upkeep or bookkeeping. And so we write systems which run... which run themselves. Definitely not that. You've got to be involved. But there's like we much like Apocalypse World, we shy away from prep. Sorry, we dissuade people from prepping. We try and make people try and play the game in the moment because we don't think GM should do more work than players. That isn't fair. And
I think you hit on a really nice thing there with the fact that Spire is quite a hopeful game. I mean, it's violent and it's bloody and it's not a fun time, but there's hope there. And Heart focuses on the tragedy. It's a much sadder game, especially if you look, for instance, at like we have a section in the adversaries, which is the enemies of the game, of legendary monsters. And all of them are so sad.
The Huntress is okay. She's fine.
She's all right, but like the Basilisk is like the saddest thing in the game.
The Basilisk just wants a hug and it kills you if you hug it.
And like we have a Gorgon analog. We have somebody who turns people to stone. And he's upset because in his weird cult, everybody else fell in love and turned themselves to stone so that they could be together forever. And he's the only one left.
Oh, it's so sad.
And like that's crushing, and that's one of the biggest monsters in the game.
He's like you find him and he's frantically trying to catch a rat with his eyes closed so he doesn't turn to stone when he looks at it, so he can eat it. And
it's so sad.
We wanted to sort of have that level of like there's a definite pathetic level to all of our creatures, but also something loathsome. So you feel both proud and ashamed of killing things in Heart, which I'm quite happy with.
Yeah, well, then that runs through Spire as well. Like we never wanted an enemy to be like, it's a goblin, stab it.
Yeah.
Everything sentient is people.
Everything's people. Like think about it. Like it is, especially in Spire, you can just put a knife in somebody and they die.
Yeah.
Like the damage of a knife versus their hit points is nothing. Like you will kill them.
Yeah.
Do you want to? Can you live with yourself afterward? Like make decisions. And we kind of set it up so that GMs can lean into that and make it that really sad grey area if they want to. Or they can go the other way and go bigger and more bombastic with it. And it's kind of up to them. We don't try and force one direction particularly.
Yeah, that's the thing that stood out for me, because I am a massive fan of storytelling games and ones I don't have to use too much, like you said, brain power to add up maths and it's got this many hit points, etc. So I am a massive fan of storytelling games, like you said. And just going back, so obviously, like Mary said, like you started off with Goblin Quest, which I did kickstart. I found my name in the back of the book. I was like, yeah! I was like, and that was my first game from you folks, and it's such a fun game. But then, as time's gone on and you've done your big book, it seems to get you cover different genres for sure, but it just gets sadder as we go along. So I just wondered, is there? I mean, are you massive fans of the sort of more political or sort of the horror stuff, or is it just because, like you were saying before, Chris? I think like you based this game on emotion, which I think is such a powerful. I love that sort of phrase, a game based on emotion. I love that. But so is that, would you consider that's what your games are, or is there a particular genre that you folks really enjoy?
I mean, personally, I lean heavily into horror. Like I've watched far too many horror films. Like
today,
yeah.
Today.
Like 90% of my role-playing game library is horror-based games. I adore it as a genre, because I think honestly it's one of the best genres there is. Just like because there's so much hope in it in a bizarre way. Like, I mean, even if you take real traditional style sort of torture porn end of the spectrum Saw films. Like they're only interesting because there's hope they'll escape. If they don't escape, it's not interesting. Or they don't try and escape, it's not interesting. So putting games with that sort of trial by emotion in them is really fun. Like there's a lot of that in Spire, in the Vigilites versus the standard, in quotation marks, Church of the Drow. And like looking at radicalization and all this sort of stuff. And we tried to do something interesting there, but I mean, I don't understand politics. Grant understands politics a lot more than I and Mary as well. And Mary understands a lot of it. So I just do the horror stuff.
I think you're selling yourself a little bit short. Because I think that the pair of you, when it came to Spire, you thought really carefully and designed really carefully around the idea of what revolution is actually like for a colonized people.
Yeah, I mean, we very much had to, if nothing else.
Right, but except that a lot of people don't.
No, I'm not sorry. That wasn't to diminish.
Taking dark elves and thinking about the way that they've been treated and subverting that and turning it into something in which you get a sense of what that revolution, like where that desire comes from. The root of that is based in the emotion and the reality of how people are living. And I think
we wrote it in the wake of Brexit.
Yeah, and people see. Justifiably, I think people see echoes of the Troubles in it. People see echoes of all sorts of things, because it is in part based in if you put people in that situation and ask how far will you go to make a difference, there is something really meaningful there. And with Heart as well, I think you I don't know how much the pair of you have talked about this, but I know that Grant and I have talked about the idea of like an anti-colonialist dungeon crawl.
Oh, absolutely,
because this is a dungeon crawl where you don't get to the end and beat the dungeon. The dungeon eats you in some form. You don't get to change it that much.
Yeah, we were really careful when writing Heart. Like, one of the things we toyed with for a short moment was the idea of like a corruption score. And we're like, no, we don't want the heart to be a virus. We want it to be a thing.
It's alien, but it's not malevolent.
Yeah. You're on its turf and it's reacting. And that's why, like, especially if you read the splash page of Heart, like, the heart wants to give you what you want. It just doesn't understand you in any way.
It means well.
It means well. It understands desire, but it's going to, as it says, it's going to give you what you want, or it's going to kill you trying.
I think I've heard you both rail about the pointlessness of traps in standard dungeons.
Oh, I can't stand them. There's no point. They're just health and safety violations for the
just
goblins.
Make it harder to go to the bathroom.
Right.
So Heart is a game that comes from the standpoint that everything you're going to fight in that dungeon lives there. You're in its home.
Yeah.
You are the trespasser.
If you find a trap, it's because you wanted there to be a trap.
Because you expected one.
Yeah.
I'd like to briefly mention as well, just in terms of our creativity coming along, this is something which I think I've noticed with Chris and I, is that we didn't take ourselves seriously for a long time. And if you look at my work before Spire, it was all sort of very quick. And like Goblin Quest, it's silly, it's fun, and we're not sort of telling these big stories. I didn't view myself as someone who could create art. And then in 2016, there was this big sort of, oh, actually, I can make art. Oh, actually, this matters. And I think that as we move into Heart and Spire and these sort of things we're working on now, there's an element of we're taking ourselves seriously. We're like, actually, we have these. I reckon that I can tell stories about this, and I think that that's a valuable thing to do. And I think I kind of wish that more designers would have the confidence. Confidence is the right word. The safety in their ability to be able to say, oh, actually, I want to make a game about something. Actually, I want to, rather than, it's a silly game about goblins exploding and what have you. I think that's something really valuable, and it's been really lovely seeing the Itch.io crowd come out with some really weird stuff which defies my understanding, but I'm sure it's great.
What I found interesting with all of your games, like, again, going through the back catalogue when I was doing sort of research for this interview, and you got your silly games, which I would use to, like, I've used quite a number of them for this podcast. I feel like I've funded you guys for at least the last year.
Fiona, there's a reason we all showed up to the podcast. we're very thankful.
But then with like I said, like going back through to the Spire and stuff, I feel actually recently, so I actually bought Spire as a physical copy for my fiance who's in the US, and I sent that across to him for our anniversary because we're both big D&D players, and that's how we started, that's how we sort of met and stuff. And it got to the point where obviously there's the point where you're like, well, we're all quite safe in our Wizards of the Coast bubble, that's nice, but what other games can we get? And obviously starting this has helped, this podcast, because then bless him, Jacob has bought me quite a number of games which are very, very interesting. I've read through like some like Powered by the Apocalypse games, which I find really cool. But then like I sent him some like Blades in the Dark, and he really got into the not darker themes, I don't want to say that, but like sort of a different genre. And I was like, ooh, Spire would be excellent for that. And I actually really love the concept of Spire. It sort of goes on to my next question, the artwork for it in Spire, in Strata, and in Heart. It's incredible to look at. Like you've got, firstly, a detailed map. I love a good detailed map.
Well,
no, I do.
Say detailed.
Yeah,
I think it's detailed.
Detailed, not canonical.
That's all right.
Yeah.
Layers change and shift.
It's very confusing when you get asked occasionally, like, "Oh, what's this thing on the map?" I'm like, "I've never heard of that. What is it?"
What's it with a floating island? We don't know. Tim put that in. We haven't.
We have no idea.
Yeah, different artists have different interpretations of Spire. So Adrian Stone, who did the majority of the art, in all of the art in the book, has neon lights in his Spire, which I don't think any of us thought about.
Absolutely
Certainly I know
not.
I didn't. Tim has floating islands and a variety of other things that we'd never really, again, just haven't really considered. But there's a really nice flexibility to that. Like, it goes well with the story game aspects of what we're trying to put forward. Spire's yours. And that goes for the artists as well as for the writers, which is interesting.
It's really nice working with our artists, because with Adrian and Felix, our art briefs are maybe 2 sentences long.
I was gonna ask, like, how much information do you let them go?
We give them the text. Yeah, absolutely none. We give them the text and we say, can we have a picture of a person stabbing another person? Maybe.
Adi didn't even read the text.
Adrian. I don't think Adrian's read the book.
No. I mean, it didn't slow him down. He's done an incredible job.
Not even a pace miss.
It's working for him.
So good. Felix got deep.
Oh my days.
Felix got super deep into the book. Like, it was a bit scary, but a bit amazing.
It's a different book now that he's been involved in it.
Yeah, and he's defined it.
Spire is quite brisk in that, I think, and I'm really glad with the style, because that Adrian's style is slightly more detailed than that usually, but we asked for like really brisk, broad styles. What we were after was characters that anyone could look at and then project themselves onto. So we've ended up with this sort of stylized, there's kind of Art Nouveau styles in there as well. There's something quite grimy, but it's very brisk and 2-dimensional and lets you sort of impart yourself on it. Whereas Felix does this ultra detailed stuff, which has this, like, which I think really relates to the personal obsession which we have in Heart, and that's completely by luck.
Yeah.
Where we didn't try especially hard. Both of them responded to shout-outs. I did a call on Twitter and was like, "Hey, do you want to draw a role-playing book?" And they both got in touch with us off the back of that, because it's weirdly hard to find artists. I don't know. I guess it's as hard as it should be, but it's
difficult to find artists who can maintain a quality and style for the length of an entire book.
Yeah,
there are a lot of amazing artists who can put out just an astonishing picture, but they can't do that again the next day, and again the next day, and again the next day.
And to our incredibly vague briefs.
That's not to say they are in any way worse artists. They are just as good, but somebody who can illustrate a whole book to a deadline is gold dust.
Yeah.
What do you think the best ingredients are for a story, either set in Spire or Heart? I know, because you've obviously created scenarios, and obviously you've got Strata, and you've got the new was it Vermilion Black Ops for Vermilion Black Ops for Heart. But if someone was to do one from scratch completely, what would you say is the best ingredients for a scenario using those systems?
I really like the Church of the Gun from Spire, and I reckon it'd get on well anywhere. The Church of the Gun is, I believe, Chris's invention.
Yep, Brother Hellion, Church of the Gun.
Brother Hellion, who heard the voice of angels and the crack bang of cordite, and it's like they are. I'm not going to say that they're violent. They're not non-violent, but they worship guns as holy objects, and like all of the advances you can get in Spire are like, oh, I've got virgin birth, which means I no longer need to use the reload tag on my pistol. And it's
just slide bullets in from somewhere else.
It's this really sort of it combines two things I love in fiction, which is Catholicism and guns. And I hate in real life Catholicism and guns, but I like pretend Catholicism and guns. So yes, that's what I put in. What about you, Mary?
Honestly, I just want to play with the basilisk.
The basilisk from Heart is lovely.
Oh baby.
Because there's so much wrong with him. I ran a game of Spire, which involved a pub crawl.
Nice.
I think it's one of those games which it's the sort of game that really does well if you can. In fact, I think this is true of Heart as well. If you can give your players a base and then put that base under threat for some reason. So there's a general thing there around like how you think about giving your players something that they value, because I think without, especially for Spire, giving your players something that they value and then threatening it gives you that's such a fundamental theme of the game that I think it's a really important thing to try to do actually in play if you can. But also it's just fun to have pub crawls. And if you give your players a bar and then threaten it with Elfir on a bender, I think that can be quite entertaining.
Everyone loves a bar.
Everybody loves a bar. That's why we made that entire district of them.
Yeah.
For me, it's got to be Blood Witches from Spire and Heart.
Magical transforming girls.
Magical transforming girls. They're just so much fun because they've got this kind of noble aspect to them in a way, because they think that some of them think they're kind of above others because they've got this power and all this sort of stuff, but they run the gamut from the kind of wood witch antlers in dirt all the way up to, one of the adventures, Eidolon Sky, we have a blood witch who's essentially a duchess, and her name is Molly. And I love her dearly.
She dresses cats, doesn't she?
She has loads of familiars that are cats that she dresses up in little suits, and she invites people over for tea. And you have this beautiful sit down dinner with a blood witch. And as you're sitting down, the illusion she's got on the room flickers in and out, and you can see the kind of underlying lair that you're actually in.
Oh, cool!
And she's genuinely nice. She's not going to hurt you. She's a lovely person.
She could pluck gallons of blood out through your nose, but she doesn't.
She could accidentally exsanguinate you.
What was the name of the blood witch in Pauline's scenario?
It was a midwife.
The midwife, sorry.
I forget it was a French name. She was great, though.
Yeah.
That's a useless bit of audio.
Hey. All right. Hooray, I can cut out some audio. No, not at all. Cool. So I asked a couple of people sort of to send in some questions, and someone who wants to ask, from Ringo, formerly of Bad Moon Cafe, but now of Drafts. You know Ringo.
Yeah, we know Ringo. He could email us. What's he doing on the phone?
I know.
Sure.
I don't know. At what point do you relinquish control and trust your readers and players to get it and stop hand-holding either mechanics or characteristics? He's currently writing his own game and doing character classes, but he's not sure. He would like the players to take a template and do what they wish, but he doesn't know how much to do.
I often relinquish control halfway through a sentence.
Yeah, it's the old thing of nothing survives contact with the enemy. And honestly, anything you do is going to be screwed with. And that's not a bad thing. That's what you want, right? So just write it so that you've got the shopping cart to the top of the hill.
Yeah.
And then the last bit of description you put on it, where you get that hook, that thing where people go, yes, I want this. That's you just giving it a stern kick, and the players will take it from there.
Really, because we've used the soapbox racer analogy before, getting soapbox
we are
racers
very much shopping cart.
But yeah, shopping cart's much better because it's much less stable, and we have those in the UK.
Yeah, and there's too many people in it, and one wheel's gone.
I figure maybe a mace, a dog, a bunch of a full bin, that sort of thing. Yeah. That's how we do games. Also, how we do scenario writing. In that we just load a shopping trolley full of things and then leave it precariously at the top of a hill,
and just hope for the best.
Absolutely. And the NPCs are standing in the path of the cart.
One of our biggest adventures is Kings of Silver for Spire, and what that is a couple of newspaper clippings, an order to go and take over a district, and then some locations and NPCs. Off you go. There's no, you must go here. There's a scene here with this. Mm-hmm. We say, well, if this person is angry at you, this might happen, maybe. And that's as far as we go.
Much like with the beats we have in Heart. So Heart is built around your you have a calling, as I mentioned earlier, and so that gives you a selection of scenes you'd like to see, basically, from each character. We have those for every NPC. It's here's some suggested scenes which might be fun if you think they'd be fun. And we operate in quite a loose sort of, everything's in this delicious soup, and you simply, I guess it's a soup and a hill
broth shopping cart.
Yeah, there's a delicious bowl of miso in the shopping
carts.
Cart.
Don't hold as much liquid as you'd like.
No.
I think it's super easy to overwrite an RPG. The amount of information that you think you need to give your players to give them fun is dramatically less than the amount of information you need to give your players in order for them to have the same thing in your head in their heads that you do. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, if what you're aiming for is to give people just a load of story hooks that they can take and run with, you don't need a lot of detail at all. You can do that with sort of 3-4 words.
Yeah.
If what you want is for people to have a very prescribed experience, then you need much, much more in the way of authorial control. It won't work, but you can try. And then at some point, it just tips over into writing a novel.
Yeah.
Naomi from Power Word Roll.
She also knows where we live.
I know.
I was on her show.
I know. She wanted to know what was your first RPG, and then what was the RPG that changed how you saw RPGs?
So mine was one of the old starter sets for Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, which I got at the tender age of 9 years old. All those years ago. And then after that, wow. And then after that, it was Call of Cthulhu. Honestly, that just changed the paradigm. Like, oh, cool! I don't have to go down dungeons anymore and do stuff I don't want to do. I can go and do a horror scenario and just go horribly mad. And that just now that's all I play in games.
Just what you've always wanted.
It is, Mary.
What about you, Mary? What was your first RPG? And then what RPG changed you?
So I got into RPGs relatively late. I got into it when I was at university. Dungeons and Dragons 4th edition would, I think, be my first.
0.5 was your first book.
Oh, 3.5, sorry. Yeah. Yes. Sorry, I just skipped over the entire concept of 3rd edition for a second there.
I mean, I can understand why.
Yeah.
4th edition, best edition.
That's controversial. I might have to edit that out.
No, absolutely not.
Interestingly, I think the game that changed the way I thought about RPGs was Mage the Ascension, because you could just make shit up. There was so much open space in Mage. D&D was so, especially 3.5, was so prescriptive and so explicit and deliberate about what you could do and what you can't. And Mage is just like, here's a ton of stuff. Here's a magic system that, broadly speaking, allows you to describe anything that you can think of. And if you can persuade the GM that it's possible, then you can probably do it. I got a lot out of that game. To be fair, I've never written an RPG. I've written scenarios, but never an actual game. So, from a systems point of view, that game struck me and still strikes me as being this enormous explosion of freedom in a hobby that was very, very tightly bound up to that point.
My first ever role-playing game was Slay Industries.
Ooh.
The first game that I played. I ran some games a bit for my mates when I was in high school. I didn't really know what I was doing. I wasn't part of a larger community. I ended up in a game in first year university of Slay Industries, which is kind of, the best I can say is revolutionary Thatcherite cyberpunk.
But with more rules.
Yeah, so it's set on the planet Slay, where it is always raining. There are 6 different kinds of rain, and you roll a d6 to see which one it is. And you had to invest 310. I looked it up on my blog because I wanted to see what the numbers were. You had to invest 310 points into no fewer than 173 different skill categories. It's ranged from strength, demolitions, and torture, all the way through to lip reading, sleeping aptitude, and sewing.
All are equal under Slay's system.
Yeah, so like I had a lovely time playing Slay. The GM I had was a sort of pressure washer douche, but he did okay. And the setting was fun. I want to officially apologize for conjuring that image into everyone's. That was not a cool thing to say out loud. But the game which changed everything.
Accurate though.
Yeah, no, James Moran is that guy, and I'll say that on record.
Cool.
The game which changed everything
Hi, James.
for me. Hey, James. Unlikely event you're listening to this. Selling shoes in Holland or whatever it is you do now. The game which changed everything for me was Dogs in the Vineyard by D. Vincent Baker.
That's such a good game.
It's a tremendous game. I went along to an open London indie RPG meetup back in 2010, 2011. And we played it, and I was like, oh my God, games can do this. And it showed me that you can write a game about one specific thing very well. And that same day, I played Cold City. No, sorry, Hot War. It was either Cold City or Hot War.
I don't remember the name of the game, but I do remember how furious you were.
Do you remember that guy who wouldn't stop talking?
Yes.
Oh, I want to push him down the stairs. Anyway, that was a bad system. I didn't like that one, but Dogs in the Video was great.
What are your predictions for RPGs and sort of independent RPG businesses in the near future? I appreciate when I wrote this question, I didn't really think we'd all be stuck in our houses and the world would be going to rubbish. So maybe in the near future, not 10 years.
I don't know, man. It's very hard to predict anything right now. Like, the role-playing industry is doing okay out of this, because a lot of people we're doing okay. I don't know how people are doing on a broader scale.
People still need fun.
People need fun, and
retail is an issue.
Retail's fucked. Especially given like a lot of the role-playing industry relies on retail in America, so that's really fucky.
Well, and also they get a lot of their money from board games, which is a thing where you sit around with a load of friends and pass little vectors of disease.
Touch the same thing.
Yeah.
So that's the challenge. Role-playing games are doing okay because you can play them online with very little difference between the experiences. Mara, what do you think? You're a business person.
Yeah.
I'm going to say big pickup in games that can be played online. There are a few different interesting scenes going on, and I think a lot of the big players, especially in America, like the big RPG publishers that publish the more traditional things, are super reliant on retail distribution. So a lot depends on how American retail recovers, and I guess whether American retail recovers in terms of selling like big hardback books. You know, if your business is mostly in, like, if you publish stuff and you make your own books, there's a bunch of different ways of selling those books. In America, what you tend to have to do is sell lots of books to a distributor who then sells those books to individual friendly local game stores who then sell those books to customers. It's quite a low margin business, but it's huge. And if your business is primarily in that kind of triple layer of selling stuff, like if friendly local game stores don't exist or can't sell stuff, then there's a lot of like that's a big issue for your business. I think we might see quite a big shift in who is selling well and what the kind of power is for different bits of the industry. From a business point of view.
Well, what we're seeing now in games being created is kind of interesting. We're seeing a flood of, this is not meant to be derogatory, but of random games. Yeah. Of people just going, yeah, I'll give it a shot. Which I think is great.
Like podcasts.
Yeah. Because they've got the time. Like, what else you can do? You're not going anywhere. And they've now currently got the time to put that idea into motion and see what can happen. So we're seeing a lot of smaller games and very tentative games popping up. Like games where people are very unsure of themselves. Like, I made a thing, please look at the thing. And we're also seeing a lot of games that play with the space a little bit interestingly. Like there's a fantastic one called This Discord is Full of Ghosts.
So good.
Which I managed to get a game of with 12 people. So the idea is that you have a completely separate Discord server to all the ones you normally use. And half of the players are ghosts and can only type. And half of the players are investigators and are only on voice comms. So the ghosts can hear the investigators talk through their walkie-talkies. And there's all these different rooms, like the stairs, the entryway. And you make a load of... The game is free, by the way, me telling a load of what the game is.
I don't think it is free, so I think you should pay for it.
No, it's free.
Okay, well, pay for it anyway, yeah?
Yeah, pay for it. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
And the idea is that the ghosts have to try and convey, like, who they are, like their actual name, how they died, and why they're still a ghost. And then the players have to get them to a room that links them to that history and then exercise them. And like, when I was playing, I was a ghost and somebody walks into the living room, which isn't one of my rooms. So in another room, I put a link to Dream a Little Dream of Me, like the song, the acoustic version. Yeah. And when they see the other room flash, they know something's happened there. So they can go there and they press play on the video. And you can drag people around the house with links and
that's
typing.
Cool.
And bits of it kind of become like playing Zork because you're typing and you're going, okay, we'll go north. But you can also you can only communicate through sound, pictures, and text. And it's such a good game.
It reminds me a bit of 10 Candles.
It's a bit 10 Candles. But specifically because it's using the affordances of something to intersect with game mechanics in a way that you couldn't do in any other scenario. Yeah.
Like 10 Candles, you need the candles. There is, you have to be in physical space. You have to have those things. Without those, it's not the same game. It doesn't work.
It's not worth playing.
And I think this Discord is Full of Ghosts is probably the first online game I've seen that, like, I'm sure there are others. It's the first one that I've seen that goes, okay, you're playing this online. How do we use that? How do we make that part of play rather than seeing it as an obstacle we have to get over?
Yeah.
How do we turn it into something that we use to make a better experience?
Although, top tip with this Discord is full of ghosts. Don't play it with 12 people the first time.
It's a lot of people.
That's chaos.
I completely agree with you, Mary. I think so. I do improv, and obviously you can't do improv with other people now. You've got to do it all online. And one of the courses I was doing, they talked about, like, all right, well, the online format shouldn't be a barrier. How can we make this better? So we've been playing around with, like, okay, well, let's try and do a news show, but we've got all the high-tech, like, Twitch stuff, and someone can do the OBS and the changes, and then the improvisers just have to come in with their own green screens. Or even if they don't have that, we could do a drive-in news show, and you just have 2 people on camera, in their separate houses, and people call in, etc. And it's just, making use of that. And I agree that for RPGs, you've got, I was just looking it up just now, there's Alice is Missing, the new one, which is all on WhatsApp, and it's completely silent. And that sounds really cool. And making use of the format that you have, because if you can't interact physically in the same space, it shouldn't be a barrier. Like you were saying, board games, you need to be in person-ish. I mean, there are like tabletop simulator and whatnot, but actually nothing's stopping role-playing games. And I think for me, seeing role-playing games being streamed on Twitch and on YouTube is so helpful, because sometimes, I definitely get the rules wrong, but then if I watch someone go, oh, that's how you do it. Like I recently just I've edited and about to put out Mouse Guard, which is a beautiful little game, but my God, there are so many rules.
Yeah, that's Burning Wheel for you.
Yeah, and the combat was so... I just couldn't get my head around it until someone said, oh, it's a bit like rock, paper, scissors, except with 4 cards. I was like, oh, that makes more sense. It just didn't say that in the book. In its 300 pages. It's just like...
Mouse Guard doesn't need to be 300 pages.
It's very beautiful. Like, the lore of it's really sweet. But yeah, there's just so much for it. For me, it's like a role-playing game meant for children. Or to encourage people to be like, oh, you can solve it with all these tests. And then it's like, but combat, there's so many rules, and there's tests and versus and independent tests. And you're like, I just want to...
Absolutely not. Not doing that.
No.
I think there's a big difference between what will happen with the kind of RPGs as art and what will happen with RPGs as a business. I think we're all, like, human beings need play. I think that gets missed a lot. We need play to be human. It's one of the things that makes us human. And I think from that perspective, what we do is more important now than maybe it's ever been, in the same way that almost all arts and culture right now matter, because they're part of what is keeping people sane and keeping them connected and keeping them safe. But at the same time as that, if we're facing a recession in the US and in the UK, that will have a big impact on people's capacity to pay for things. It will have an impact on which creators can create. We are in a position of great privilege being able to do what we do. Not everyone gets to do that. And so I think we're going to see more splintering. And I would like to say that I would really like to believe that it will get easier for people to make a living in this environment, but I think right now that that's really hard to foresee. I'd like to be part of making a difference to that.
I completely agree. I think we spoke before this podcast started about your talk you did for the Tin Network in London, and I think it's very hard in general just to start a business if you've got no experience of anything like that before, but actually just having someone go through you and telling you, like, these are the certain things I've experienced, and sharing that, it can be overwhelming, but sharing those experiences are actually super helpful, because then you're not necessarily alone in this. It is hard and it will be an uphill struggle, but if you're passionate about it, then you go for it if you can. Yeah, again, it's talking from a position of privilege as well, but it's nice to know that certainly for that you shared your experiences and people were interested in stuff. So, and
I think we are in a hobby where the more people play, the bigger our hobby gets, the bigger our business gets, the bigger the pool is. I don't think, like, most RPG creators are not in competition with each other. We're in collaboration, and the more we can support and lift up other creators, I think the more we should.
I mean, that's one of the really interesting things about the RPG community, is that on the whole, it is a positive one, and that people are keen to help each other out. Like, if you put up a game for pay what you want, people pay for it. And if it was negative overall, nobody would pay for anything. They just take it. And people are looking to help each other. It's just like remembering to ask. Like, you can ask for help and stuff. That's fine. There's communities all over the place. Like, there's Reddits, there's Discords, there's all sorts of stuff. And it's good to be as part of as many of those communities as you can be.
And like I think it was you that said it, Chris. Like, I know you said like, oh, just random RPGs, and I know you didn't mean that in a bad way, but actually, I think that's true. Like, there are so many games coming out now that aren't necessarily the traditional high fantasy, but there are stuff like, obviously, in terms of sort of like maybe along, like when I think back to Spire, and this is, like you said, that sort of revolutionary sort of thing, which just feel quite relevant maybe this week more than more weeks. But is that the idea that we can, if you wish to, you can look at it and, experience that in a game, in a safe environment, but talk about those feelings. Presumably, if you have a session 0 as well, and just talk to your players, say, hey, we're going to explore these themes. Are people comfortable with it? And we're doing it like this because and learning from it. I think I find role-playing games are an interesting way to learn stories that aren't necessarily from my real life perspective. And also stories that aren't safe. Yes.
Like going into a dungeon's not safe.
No.
But you when you're playing role-playing games, you've got access to safety tools. You're among friends. Everything's okay. And then you can go into dangerous territory and have a safe interaction with it and try and process that as a person and try and learn from it and work out what maybe even at a base level, what you think about certain things. And I think that's something RPGs do that nothing else really comes close to, in my mind.
Well, what are your plans for the future? Do you have any other projects you're working on just now? Or have you got any ideas of what you'd like to do?
Reinforcing my windows. We're working on something exciting at the moment. We're going to try and I'm not sure how much we can say about it really, because we haven't got any mechanics down, basically. But we're excited.
Super early stages.
Yeah,
that's fine. Keep it under wraps. But you're clearly working on something then.
Yeah, we are working on something. Which is exciting.
They're never not working on something.
That's true.
I don't know, man. I don't know. There was a period of 2 months after Heart finished where I wasn't really working on things, and I went full mad.
Yeah, we went insane.
Okay, Grant. Right, that was 2 weeks. It was 2 weeks.
Okay, it was.
And then you immediately got, like, you went through that phase where you ranked all the monsters in the Monstrous Manual on how hot they were, and then
that phase was 6 hours.
And then you immediately picked up a whole bunch more work. So, no.
Okay, sorry. There was a period of 2 weeks where I only wrote 3 role-playing games.
Yes.
Only.
Thank you.
Essentially, what we're doing at the moment.
That is accurate.
What we're doing at the moment is we're working on another big project. But not in the same rule system.
Not in the same universe.
Not in the same universe. We're trying something else. And constantly coming up with random little ideas for one pages and things.
Ooh, exciting.
I mean, at the moment, we're just trying to get Heart out the door as well. So,
we're in that final production phase where I start tearing my hair out. But it's an interesting time because the creative work is, broadly speaking, done. We're down to conversations with fulfillment providers and getting like logistics and shipping and getting everything into the right place, with a couple of exceptions that are to do with the COVID, like delays related to the disease, which kind of means that the two of you have a bit of time to do weird stuff and experiment and play.
Tried to do a card game for a while, didn't work.
Yeah. I think it's really important that stays play as well.
Thank you guys for joining me and talking to me about your stuff. I really enjoyed listening to it.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
I love talking about me.
Don't we all? Just talking about you, Chris.
I love talking about Chris.
That's correct. That's the correct way to be.
I look forward to the weekly meetings.
What's on the agenda? Oh, yes.
Chris.
Ways.
So where can we find your work and where can we follow you on social media if you use it, or where can we find you on the internet?
Go for the shortened URL?
Yeah, please go for the shortened URL.
You can find us on rrdgames.com. You can go there and find all of our games published in a relatively timely fashion after I throw them up on Twitter. You can also find all of our big serious games and all our bundles of one pages as well and that sort of thing. You can follow me at GS Howitt on Twitter.
I'm not on Twitter, basically.
Yeah, that's fair. You have an account, but it's not
I have
really
an account,
worth,
but I'm not looking at that. Have you seen it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a fucking nightmare. Yeah, fair enough. Mary?
Mary's muted.
Okay, fascinating.
So one of the important things is that on our website, you can access a link to get to our Discord channel, which is where all the cool kids hang out. Essentially, we have a load of people talking about our games a lot and asking advice and all stuff, and people making their own games, and it's actually really nice.
Oh,
I'll also say that you can follow Mary at NewsMary on Twitter.
Thank you. Sorry.
Hello.
My internet fell off. You can follow me on Twitter at NewsMary. I tweet approximately 75% angry politics and 25% other things.
hooray!
Just as a fair warning, because I don't want anyone to be surprised.
Stay for the 25%.
Brilliant. Oh, thank you so much for joining me, guys.
That's been lovely.
Thank you for having us.
I'm hoping to do more of these special Q&A bonus episodes in future, including Q&As on the one-shots we've run here at What Am I Rolling? If you have a question you'd like to send in, or a submission for help, my fictional RPG character is having difficulties, please send them along to our email address. That's whatamirollingpodcast@gmail.com. And that's it. Great. See you next time.